Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. With your New York Giants playing NFC East rival Dallas on Thursday night, here to help me break down the game is RJ Ochoa, the great and unique one and only RJ Ochoa of SB Nation's Dallas Cowboys website, Blogging the Boys. RJ, thank you very, very much for the time today.
Of course, Ed. Great to be with you. Anytime it can be Valentine's Day for me is a treat, and that's exactly what it is right now. How many times in your
Oh,
life do people make a pun or a joke about that?
many, 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 many. I'm 64 years old, RJ, and I've probably been hearing that joke since I was about 4.
Okay,
So
so
some
almost as
some
long as
form
the
of that
Cowboys Super
joke,
Bowl
it's
drought. Yeah,
it's it, it it's all good. It's all good, but hey, send me flowers.
good deal.
Hey, when we were when we were setting this up, all right, you made mention of the fact that this felt like a week when maybe the Giants could get the Cowboys. And I kind of agree, but that is kind of a weird feeling for both of us because Dallas has won 6 straight, 13 out of the last 14 matchups between these two teams. I'm pretty sure you've come to look at it, and Dallas fans have come to look at it as a gimme. And Giants fans have come to look at it like, well, even if maybe we should win, we'll find a way to screw it up. So this is kind of a weird place for both of us, maybe.
Yeah, I know my colleague Dave Halpern feels similarly and spoke similarly to you in the 5 question series that is an SB Nation staple. And it's for me, it's a combination of factors, and it's not just one or two or even three things. It's obviously how poorly the Cowboys are playing right now. It's that Malik Neighbors represents a true game-changing weapon, the type that can take over a game and be the reason why his team, in this case the Giants, were to win, and a team like the Cowboys could lose. And I think there is something to the one-sided nature of this particular divisional rivalry. At some point the dog catches the car, right? At some point, Tom catches Jerry. At some point, the son, beats the dad in pickup basketball or a round of golf. And it can't be this way forever. And so if we have learned anything about the NFL and specifically the Dallas Cowboys, it's that they are theater, and you would know this as a New Yorker, that they are theater of the highest variety. And so it would be fitting for the straw that breaks this camel's back to be finally losing to the New York Giants. If you could come up with the nth way that you could exemplify how far the Cowboys have fallen, no offense, it would be losing to the Giants.
No offense taken, not after a total of 89-17 last year, I think was how it went. And by the way, before we go any farther, I have a request. Do you realize how many years Dave Halpern and I have been trading 5 questions?
I I'm very aware.
Can you please get somebody else? No
Dave,
offense to Dave, but can you please get somebody else?
for those
17 years, I think.
for those unaware, Dave founded Blogging the Boys, and he has some passions that he holds near and dear to his heart, and things that remind him of the good old days, so to speak, are at the very top of that list. And 5 questions predates my time at SB Nation, and obviously that better than I do. It's a fun thing, it's a fun tradition, and Dave likes being a part of it.
Yeah, Dave and I have done 5 questions, I think, twice a year since 2007. I
It's good
th-
good
there
year for
there
you.
can't be anybody else on this network who have paired up for more 5 questions than Dave and I.
I mean, just kind of doing a quick scan through my mini helmet collection and thinking of the people that we work with. I really don't know. I don't know anyone who could kind of come close. I mean, it would have if Joel Thorman or Gina Kelly were still manning their team positional posts, and maybe, but outside of that, it's you and Dave that are carrying the mantle for everyone.
Yep, yep. Old timers, old timers. That's just what it is. Hey, let's get back to talking about the Cowboys. And it's got to be a weird feeling for you. It's not often that the Cowboys get off to slow starts. Um, Win over Cleveland week 1, really bad loss to New Orleans, giving up 44 points. What amounted to a bad loss at home to Baltimore, behind 28-6 before you make a frantic late rally that falls short, like a lot of those frantic late rallies do. Um, but that's 2 straight losses at home. That's an awful lot of points given up. I think the Dallas defense is 30th in the NFL overall. Um, what what's going on with the Cowboys?
Yeah, so they're 1-2 for only the 13th time in franchise history. The first time since 2020, which was the first year of the Mike McCarthy era. And obviously, that season was ultimately lost by way of the Dak Prescott injury, which incidentally came against the New York Giants in the first matchup between the two teams. The second, of course, is the last instance in which the Giants have beaten the Cowboys over the last almost decade. Um, I mean, what a surprise! Not doing anything to your roster over the course of the offseason will have some consequences. And look, people say things like that, and fans of people say things like that. In this case, it isn't hyperbolic. It isn't exaggeration. It's literally true. The Cowboys allowed, and we could sit here and dissect each one of them. I know we're not going to, but the merits of bringing back Tyron Smith or Tony Pollard or Jonathan Hankins or whoever the case may be, but they let every important player walk in free agency. And a lot of them chose to be very clear. It's a two-way street in every single one of these instances, but they did not supplement those things. Their big marquee free agent signing was Eric Kendricks, who the day that they signed him, earlier in the morning, agreed to terms with the 49ers. He wasn't even, they weren't even the first team that he agreed to terms with. They drafted completely for need. They ignored the running back position, in my humble opinion, because they wanted to bring Zeke Elliott back and they wanted him to be in their running back room once more. And they have just been stubborn at every turn, delaying the extensions for CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, despite the whole world cautioning them against this, decreeing all in when they knew they weren't going to do anything. They have, I mean, we've all known toxic people in life, unfortunately, and they have done just about everything they could to make this as toxic of a situation as possible, including sending the head coach into a contract year himself with a staff that includes a brand new defensive coordinator that is all in a contract year themselves.
Oh, come on now, RJ. I mean, the Cowboys did nothing to the roster. I mean, the Giants traded you Jordan Phillips. Come
So,
on now.
are you aware of that saga and what has happened?
Yes, but I would love for you to weigh in on that saga. By the way, before you do that, I'm very thankful to the Cowboys that they allowed Jordan Phillips to play 2 games before this whole thing took place so that the 2026 6th and 7th round pick swap would take place.
So, to your point, the terms of the trade with Jordan Phillips that the Cowboys made with the Giants were conditional, and they have been met. So Dallas will send their 6th to the Giants 2 years from now, I guess a year and a half from now, and receive their 7th in return. Um, that being said, Jordan Phillips has not been great because the Cowboys have ignored the defensive tackle position for almost 30 years. They have just tried to get cast-offs there. And even if you think that they thought highly of Jordan Phillips, I don't mean to slight Jordan in any way, they didn't make that trade until well into training camp. You can't do that. You can't start to take things seriously once training camp has begun. But nevertheless, he did not play well, and they were rather not pleased with him. And the next part of what I'm about to say is purely an assumption. It seemed like they wanted to stash him of sorts and not have him absorb a spot on the active roster. So he developed a wrist injury in their purview and was headed to injured reserve. Later in the day in which this was reported, he spoke to the media and said, "I don't have a wrist injury. I'm totally fine," which was bold to say the least. He is on injured reserve, so their opinion ultimately won out. But he seemed upset with the process of it all, which again speaks to how left-footed this whole process was to begin.
Yeah, Jordan Phillips maybe didn't have a wrist injury, but he had what the Giants figured out in training camp, which is a lack of ability to play anymore.
that's that's important. Yeah, that's definitely important.
Yeah. So what is the deal with the Dallas defense, RJ. I mean, this is a group with Stephon Diggs, or with Trevon Diggs, with Micah Parsons. This is a team with some good players. Is this just a matter of the Cowboys, losing Dan Quinn and trying to adjust to Mike Zimmer? Um, or is there a dearth of talent on that side of the ball?
It's hard to fight the narrative that it has a lot to do with Dan Quinn because of, where we're at in week 4 with his Commanders having such an impressive win on Monday Night Football on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals. It looks like everything he's touched has turned to gold there. I'm not here to say that it has nothing to do with Dan Quinn. I believe it was in the best interest of the Cowboys to move on from Dan. Multiple things could be true. I was not a fan of the Mike Zimmer hire. The only candidates who the Cowboys reportedly seriously considered in addition to him were Ron Rivera and Rex Ryan, to just properly contextualize how seriously they took this. You're right. They have talent. Micah Parsons is a wildly talented player. DeMarcus Lawrence is incredibly underrated. Trayvon Diggs is one of the better corners in the NFL. Eric Hendricks is an okay player. DeMarvion Overshown is somebody who the team thought highly of. But I think that maybe their names are a little bit too big right now. Maybe everybody except for Micah and Trayvon, they're clearly incredibly talented. But beyond all of that, this is a group that has been due for regression, right? You talked about 2007, that 2007 and 2011 Giants. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know in 2008 the Giants defense was still stout, but in 2012 there had to have been some drop off where people said, "What happened?" Right? Like we were this great defense a year ago, and that's defense in the NFL. That's defensive success. There is generally regression to the mean. And the Cowboys had not had that for 3 years running. And so this bottom was going to come out soon enough. And it seems to have coincided with all of the rest of these things taking place, which is why it would have been smart to get ahead of it and hedge your bet. But the Cowboys were too busy doing nothing in the offseason to worry about that.
That's okay with us, RJ. That's okay with us. Um, the NFC East is a weird place these days because it feels like the Eagles are incredibly vulnerable. Feels like the Cowboys are incredibly vulnerable. Feels like the Commanders are on the rise and yet still vulnerable. The Giants are somewhere in there. I'm not sure what they are yet. Um, Although I feel a lot better about them at 1-2 than I would have at 0-3. Um, just quickly, just your overall thoughts on what this division is shaping up to be.
Obviously, no repeat winner since 2004, as you well know. And as the reigning winners, that works against the Cowboys in addition to everything that we've discussed so far today. It was super annoying, to say the least, how Philly was able to grind that win out against the Saints. Even more annoying in that the Saints had blown the doors off the Cowboys the week before.
Mhm.
So I know that people think what they do about Nick Sirianni. You and I both have our own opinions, but I I think he's a good coach. I think he's just an annoying person in some ways, and that makes evaluating the situation difficult. But I can't count them out from winning double digit games. But if I had to today, right now, bet on who wins the division, I would assume that Dallas will continue to implode and that Philadelphia will stumble over themselves and that the Giants may not have the right quarterback in place. I think you all have probably had that conversation enough times, and that Washington's the primary beneficiary of that. In fact, it's my opinion that the last two instances in which Washington won the division was really more of a result of everything else falling apart around them. In 2020, Dak Prescott had the injury that I noted, and Doug Peterson's Eagles completely collapsed, and it just wasn't enough for the Giants at the very end, as was well documented in Week 17. And then in 2015, Tony Romo broke his collarbone twice. And that allowed the door to be open for Washington to storm in and win the division. The last authentic year that they did something was RG3's rookie year 12 years ago, but I think that they're just well positioned to capitalize on things. I think that they're still green enough to where they haven't become jaded in the ways that maybe the Cowboys and Eagles have. They're just kind of sick of this stuff in ways that the Commanders players aren't.
All right, let's talk about one of the fascinating matchups that I find on Thursday night. Malik Neighbors, after 3 games, already being considered a superstar. I think Giants fans are beginning to sculpt his bust for Canton already. Um, against Trevon Diggs. And I find this fascinating for a couple of reasons because the Giants are going to throw the ball to neighbors. Diggs is a guy he'll give up some plays, but he's also a guy, former wide receiver, great ball skills, guy that's got a lot of interceptions in his career. And Malik Neighbors, I don't think has lost a 50-50 ball yet. And Daniel Jones is throwing him 50-50 balls at every opportunity. So I'm just fascinated to see how that battle plays out. There could be, the way that I look at it, RJ, there could be a 70-yard touchdown in Malik Neighbors' future, and there could also be in the same game a pick six in Trevon Diggs' future.
I mean, that's the Trayvon Diggs experience, and it has been for a long time. I don't subscribe to the notion that he's as boomer bust as a lot of places would characterize him to be. I don't think that's your point either. But Malik Neighbors is that talented and has that potential to win. And it is, it's so rare. I know we're only 3 weeks in, but where a rookie enters the fold and is anointed and is turned into a superstar and then lives up to that kind of hallmark the way that Neighbors has. And so that's intimidating, certainly. Now, Trayvon Diggs had an interception in the first week of the season. It's worth mentioning that he is returning from a torn ACL. He's obviously played 3 games, and lost to Zay Flowers on a would-be critical third down stop that effectively iced the game last week for Baltimore at the end of that frenetic comeback. So yeah, I think that's where the game will be swung in a significant way, because Trayvon is the only viable corner who the Cowboys have. Deron Bland fractured his foot before the season started. He's expected to miss some more time. And Kalen Carson, the Cowboys' fifth-round rookie out of Wake Forest, is starting on the opposite side. So it stands to reason that Dallas will allow him to work against Theo Johnson or whatever the case may be, and let Trayvon Diggs be who he is. But just because he is the mighty Trayvon Diggs doesn't mean he's going to win 100% of the time.
I will assume that you will pick the Cowboys to win the game. Just tell me um, what what happens in Dallas if the Cowboys don't win this game? Do you turn off comments at blogging the boys? Do you run for the hills? Do you shut down the website? What happens in Dallas if the Dallas Cowboys are 1-3?
If you recall, in 2019, the Cowboys played a Thursday night game on the road against the Chicago Bears, and they lost, and they let Mitchell Trubisky run all over them. I mean, it was highly, highly, highly embarrassing. And the next morning, we were on Jason Garrett watch. We were on, okay, they're going to fire him. They're going to move on. This was much later in the season because this is the earliest Thursday night game the Cowboys have ever played. So I don't think that would happen. I don't think they would fire Mike McCarthy, even if they lost 40-0. But I do think it would mark the official beginning of the end. I think that the paperwork would start to be drawn up, and I think we'd start to see a lot more checked out nature. I think we'd see some sort of somebody taking over play calling, some sort of dramatic shift or adjustment over the course of the mini bye that the Cowboys are going to have. It would be intense. I mean, it's worth mentioning, I'm not a DFW sports fan through and through. I root for the Houston Astros and the San Antonio Spurs. But in case you or your audience forgot, the Texas Rangers won the World Series last year. The Dallas Stars reached the Western Conference Finals and the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Dallas Mavericks reached the NBA Finals. Obviously, they ultimately lost, but this is the runt of the litter right now, the Cowboys, relative to the
Wow.
Metroplex. And so this would go a long way towards really, really, really highlighting it, even though the Rangers were just eliminated from postseason contention themselves. So it would live up to all of our worst expectations and our fears, which is exactly what they've done over the course of the last 2 weeks, which is why we kind of think it's coming down the bend over the next couple of days.
In or out on Bill Belichick to replace Mike McCarthy?
I mean, I've been out just kind of in a general sense, which sounds stupid, right? It sounds silly to say, like, I don't want Bill Belichick coaching my favorite team. But at this point, why not? I mean, I don't want to be the team who turned him down and then watch him, thrive somewhere else, because it was the most obvious thing of all time. So this joke is, I want off this ride. I mean, to be very clear, this has been a chaotic time. As somebody who creates content about the team, it's been productive, I suppose, in that sense. But it has been truly chaotic and toxic since they lost to the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs, because there has been no positivity. Even the positive things like signing your franchise quarterback or your star wide receiver to a contract extension were made toxic by the way that the Cowboys handled these things. If there is one person out there who can come in and subsidize this and change the culture, so to speak, it's Bill Belichick, in the way that his idol, Bill Parcells, did. Bill Parcells is the only person in the drought era that the Cowboys are in that came in and put a stop to the charade and got things about football. And that obviously set the Cowboys up for the run of success, if you want to call it that, that they had in the Tony Romo era and now Dak Prescott.
All right, RJ, appreciate the time as always. Giants fans, please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.